I'm explicitly and vehemently and passionately arguing that we should discriminate against incompetent men who wants to become leader.
Today on Between You and Me, I speak to author Tomas Chamorro-Premuzic, who wrote a book, Why Do So Many Incompetent Men Become Leaders and How to Fix It. What's your definition of incompetence, an incompetent man?
If the person who is in charge of running a team creates burnout, low levels of productivity, low levels of trust and morale, and as a consequence of that, his or her team is less productive, less effective, less innovative than its competitors, we can say there's an incompetent leader.
Who do you think are the most competent political leaders and who is the most incompetent?
The thing with politics is very hard, and when you're looking at how a president, a prime minister, head of state affects a country, we don't have that many similar units of analysis to compare, and there are so many other things.
You said that there's been a Trump effect on leadership that you've been able to see. What do you mean by that?
Well, the Trump effect is how I would label the gap between what we look for in leaders and what we should look for. I mean, most of the people that are seen intuitively or unconsciously as leadership materials, especially in corporate America, they look a lot like Donald Trump. There may be slightly less exaggerated versions of Trump, but they have a lot in common. You know, they seem fearless, unaware of their limitations, strong, self-centered, and for some people quite charismatic. Is Trump very different from previous American presidents? I would say no. Who wants to become president of America? It has to be somebody with fairly narcissistic aspirations to begin with, right? They have to be quite megalomaniac. They have to be quite fearless. And actually, they have to be pretty capable of hiding any sense of insecurity, self-doubt, etc.
I do find it fascinating, that idea of the paradigm between what is expected of women and what's expected of men, because so much is made of the glass ceiling for women. In every election, particularly in the past election, Hillary breaking the glass ceiling was sort of seen as the ultimate. But I find it interesting in the book, you say it's not so much about the glass ceiling for women that's the problem in terms of female advancement, but it's actually the lack of barriers for men. What do you mean by that?
There are a lot of obstacles for women who want to become leaders. But actually, that has systematically contributed to increasing the quality of female leadership. In contrast, the lack of obstacles for men who should not become leaders is quite evident.
But I mean, how do we fix it? Is it by creating more barriers for men? And how do we
Absolutely.
create those barriers?
I'm explicitly and vehemently and passionately arguing that we should discriminate against incompetent men who wants to become leader. So when a person is male and seems unaware of his limitations, unjustifiably pleased with himself, aggressive, maybe funny, charismatic, and quite ambitious to the point of being greedy and narcissistic, we go like, oh, leadership material. When a woman displays similar characteristics, even if it is to a lesser degree, we immediately rule her out for being pathologically ambitious, overconfident, or not as talented as she thinks. The problem is that we don't have such high standards or high enough standards when we judge men.
Are you in favor of affirmative action? Do you feel that we should use affirmative action to increase the number of women in, the boards of Fortune 500 companies, for example? Or do you think that there are problems with affirmative action?
I think in an ideal world, it wouldn't be needed because the best gender diversity intervention is to be blind to gender and focus on talent. And that if you do that, it's actually sexist against men, because you will end up with a slightly higher proportion of female leaders than men, because you look at the qualities that predict performance. Having said that, I am not naive enough to think that that will happen anytime soon. So I think positive discrimination done as early as possible can help us get there faster.
How do you think that the Me Too movement has actually helped or hurt rooting out incompetent male leadership?
I think it will definitely help. It's too soon to say it has helped, but I think, sometimes things are triggered in a unpredictable fashion, and they remind us of things that we shouldn't need reminding of. That it is not okay for men to sexually harass women, or for anybody to sexually harass other people, and that it helps to have leaders with self-control, integrity, and empathy. So I think sometimes a single movement or paradigm can put this in front of people to the point of forcing them to change, even if they don't really believe in it, but they are under pressure to change. On the other hand, it's important to understand that some of the leaders we celebrate, Steve Jobs or Elon Musk, might not be a bastion of altruistic behavior, but they are very talented, so they have the talents to back it up, and at the end of the day, people will forgive you a lot if you're performing and producing. The standards change when your performance is not as high.
You mentioned Sheryl Sandberg and Lean In. It has been fascinating to watch how Facebook, being under the ringer for the Cambridge Analytica, Russia election kind of stuff, Mark Zuckerberg seems to be held less accountable for Facebook's foibles and misdeeds than Sheryl Sandberg. Why do you think that is?
It's very interesting, not just that, but also when things were going well, the credit went to Zuckerberg and not to her, So it's almost like, because she's a woman, she's responsible for flaws and problems, but can't be credited for the successes. People still have archetypes of leaders, and especially if you get into the archetype of the entrepreneur, disruptive, creative, innovators who push the boundaries, move fast and break things, that has to be him.
Should there be a way back for incompetent leaders? I'm thinking of someone like Elon Musk, for example, who famously fell foul of the SEC. Do you think that there should be a path to redemption for incompetent leaders like Elon Musk?
Well, there's always politics, right? They can run a country or something. But leaving that aside, I think people like Elon Musk, they're so unrepresentative that it's hard to extrapolate. In general, for the average incompetent leader, there might be some people that fail in some assignments, but then can be coached, can improve, can do better, can find a better fit, a better organization, a better calling, a better industry, a better culture that actually nurtures their potential. But if we're talking about somebody who job after job demonizes, alienates, and tortures their employees, their teams, is clearly not deserving of their success, and yet they keep rising, those are the biggest offenders.